You won't believe what Michelle Obama recently shared in a podcast interview, and once you hear it, you'll realize this isn't just another celebrity mom talking about her kids. No, this is something deeper, something more real. The former First Lady sat down with Kylie Kelsey, wife of NFL star Jason Kelsey, and opened up in a way that left people shocked, emotional, and honestly inspired. She didn't hold back. From the very beginning, Michelle got real about motherhood, and not just the cute Instagram-worthy moments. She talked about the fear, the self-doubt, and the pressure that comes the second a baby is placed in your arms. She said she remembered looking at her newborn and thinking, "Oh my God, all you have is me. I feel so bad for you." Can you imagine Michelle Obama, one of the most respected women in the world, saying that? That was the moment that made people stop and listen. Michelle didn't try to sound perfect. In fact, she said she felt completely unprepared. She said she used to think, "You deserve more because I don't know anything, and now I'm in charge." That's what hit the hardest, because that's the side of motherhood people don't talk about enough. The side where love is mixed with fear, where joy meets panic. And sitting across from her, Kylie Kelsey completely understood. She laughed and nodded, admitting it felt like Michelle was reading her own thoughts out loud. That's when Michelle dropped another surprise. She teased Kylie for going for a fourth child, smiling but saying, "You're doing it a fourth time. You're brave." But this is where it gets interesting. The conversation shifted to a moment in Michelle's life that left a mark. It was about a decision that shaped the Obama family forever. Kylie asked if Michelle ever thought about having a third child, and Michelle didn't hesitate. She said when Barack brought it up, she said one word, "No." Just like that. No discussion, no debate, just no. And you might think, why? What made her so sure? Let me tell you. Michelle explained it like this: "We got lucky with the first two. It's the roll of the dice." She was afraid that if they had another child, they might not be so lucky. Maybe the third one would be completely different, harder, wild, unpredictable. And here's the craziest part. She wasn't joking. She meant it. It was a real fear, a very human fear. Michelle looked back and admitted that parenting felt like gambling. Sometimes you win with calm, sweet kids, but the next one might just turn your whole world upside down. Still, the way she said it didn't feel cold. It felt honest. She wasn't criticizing big families. In fact, she praised Kylie for managing 3 little girls and 1 on the way. But she was clear that for her, 2 was enough. She said something that made everyone laugh, but also made them think. She joked, "I admire your courage. You don't know what you're going to get." And that's the truth, right? You never know. Parenting is one big question mark, and Michelle wasn't afraid to admit it. But here's the shocking part. This wasn't just about parenting. It wasn't just about kids. It was about control. It was about fear of losing it. Even with all her fame, power, and resources, Michelle still felt like any other mom trying to keep things together. She didn't want to risk tipping the balance. She didn't want to bring another child into the mix and regret it later. And as the conversation continued, one thing became clear. There was more to this story than just choosing not to have a third baby. There was a deeper reason, one that would only be revealed later. As the conversation continued, the tone shifted. Michelle and Kylie started laughing about the husbands being girl dads, right? But what Michelle said next had people rewinding the podcast just to make sure they heard it right. She looked at Kylie, smiled, and said, "That's because that's what your husband deserves." It sounded like a joke, but then she added something even sharper about Barack. "Dude, you need a bunch of women in your life just to smack you around." The audience couldn't stop laughing, but there was a layer of truth in her words. Michelle was hinting at something bigger, the silent power of daughters. You won't believe how Michelle described life as a girl mom. She said daughters don't just love you, they check you. They challenge you, they question you, and they grow you. She even referenced a study Kylie had seen, the one about fathers of daughters living longer. Michelle didn't miss a beat. Of course they do, she said, imagining her girls staring at Barack and asking him, "Are you serious right now?" That part was funny, but it was also honest. Raising daughters, especially in a high profile family, came with its own set of rules, responsibilities, and yes, chaos. But let me tell you, this is how the story took a turn you didn't expect. Kylie casually mentioned how her kids draw on the walls and break things around the house, and she asked Michelle if Malia and Sasha ever did the same while living in the White House. And this is where it gets interesting. Michelle didn't just say no, she paused, smiled, and said, they weren't toddlers, they were teenagers, and they were living under a microscope. While most parents worry about magic markers on the wall, Michelle was worrying about prom nights, first loves, parties, all happening while every move was watched by the world. Every teenage mistake could end up in headlines. Every small decision could be twisted into controversy. And then came the real twist, the one moment that left every parent watching with a lump in their throat. Michelle recalled a memory. Sasha had just gotten her driver's license, and Michelle had made a decision. She told her daughters they had to drive themselves. No exceptions, even though they lived in the White House, even though they had access to every safety measure possible, Michelle wanted her girls to be independent. So Sasha drove, alone. And one day, it happened. The phone rang. Sasha had been in a car accident. A woman had T-boned her. The car was totaled. But here's the shocking part. Michelle's first thought wasn't panic. It wasn't about Sasha. It was about the other woman. She said, I hope the lady who hit her is okay. Because can you imagine what it must have felt like to be that woman, crashing into a car and then realizing the person you just hit was the president's daughter, and then seeing Secret Service agents rushing towards you? That moment changed everything. Michelle said it was terrifying, not because Sasha was hurt, but because it reminded her that no matter how strong or powerful you are, your kids are still just kids, vulnerable, human, and the world can be unpredictable. This is what makes Michelle's story different. It's not just about fame or politics. It's about motherhood at its rawest. The fear, the pride, the helplessness, the control you think you have until real life hits. It's about raising teenagers in the White House and still longing for the days when the biggest problem was cleaning crayon off a wall. After the story of Sasha's accident, you'd think Michelle had shared the most nerve-wracking part of her parenting journey. But no, what she said next pulled the curtain back even more. Michelle started to talk about what it really meant to raise kids in the White House. And not just any kids, teenagers, girls, in the age of social media. Let that sink in. She wasn't just worried about their grades or friend drama. She was worried about a normal teenage moment being twisted into a scandal, plastered across tabloids, and picked apart by the public. Michelle said it clearly. I wanted to give them enough rope to live and be normal teenagers, but I was also worrying about them turning up on page 6. That sentence stopped people in their tracks, because how do you balance freedom and protection when you're being watched by the world? That was Michelle's daily battle. She wanted Malia and Sasha to go to parties, to date, to mess up, to learn, just like any other kids. But she knew the world wouldn't be as forgiving. And this is where the emotional weight really came in. Michelle shared that while Chelsea Clinton and Amy Carter grew up in the White House, they didn't grow up with Instagram, TikTok, and viral tweets. Michelle admitted something powerful. You can't learn it through osmosis in the back seat of an armored car. That line hit hard. It wasn't enough for her daughters to see what life was like. They had to live it, make their own choices, take their own risks. So when they got their licenses, Michelle didn't hold them back. She let them drive. She let them step into the world, even if it scared her. But here's what makes this story different. Michelle didn't talk about her daughters like they were celebrities. She talked about them like any mother would, with love, respect, and that protective instinct that never goes away. And even now, as Malia and Sasha are in their 20s, living on their own and building their own lives, Michelle said she still feels that tug, that urge to keep them close, to protect them, to guide them. But she also knows it's not her place anymore. Still, she revealed something that made people lean in. She said that before any public mention of her daughter, she runs it by them first. She respects their privacy, their boundaries. Because, and this was the twist no one saw coming, they're not the ones seeking the spotlight. Malia and Sasha have grown up in front of the world, but they've chosen quiet lives, focused lives, lives away from the noise. And Michelle respects that deeply. She admitted that as much as she loved their time in the White House, she was relieved when it ended, not for herself, but for her daughters. I wanted them to have the freedom of not having the eyes of the world on them, she said. It was never about power. It was about peace, about giving her daughters a chance to just be. After everything Michelle shared, the fears, the challenges, the protective instincts, she finally shifted the spotlight fully onto her daughters. And that's when the emotion hit. She spoke about Malia and Sasha, not just as daughters, but as young women who had carved their own paths in a world that once tried to define them before they could even speak for themselves. This is where it gets interesting, because we often see them as the Obama daughters, but Michelle made it clear they are so much more than that. She told the story of how Malia, their firstborn, came into the world in July 1998. She described her as thoughtful, curious, and gentle, the kind of child who collected keychains, took drama classes, and once asked, "Shuey, are we rich?" In the way Michelle remembered it, Malia didn't ask because she wanted something. She asked because she was trying to understand the world. Barack even said that Malia didn't care about fancy things. She just wanted love and honesty. And that grounded the entire family. Then came a moment that brought tears to listeners' eyes. Michelle spoke about Malia's graduation from Sidwell Friends School in 2016, the same year the Obamas were preparing to leave the White House. It was a year of endings and new beginnings. Malia took a gap year before Harvard, something that surprised many. But Michelle said it was one of the smartest choices her daughter ever made. She wanted space, time to breathe, to understand who she was, away from the cameras, away from the security, away from the title of first daughter. Michelle described how Malia later stepped into the world of entertainment, quietly, confidently, and completely on her own terms. She graduated from Harvard in 2021 and began working in film and TV. Photos from her graduation went viral, not because of what she wore or who she was with, but because people saw a full circle moment. The little girl from the White House had become a woman, and she was doing it her way. But here's the part that gave everyone goosebumps. Michelle revealed that Sasha, the younger of the two, had taken a completely different path. Just as full of heart, just as grounded. Sasha embraced her individuality and was never afraid to live boldly. And through it all, the sisters remained close. That sisterhood, that unbreakable bond, became their anchor in public life. They had each other through criticism, through gossip, through years of being judged by strangers. They never let go of each other. Michelle and Barack always knew they had to protect that. So even now when they share stories or speak about their daughters publicly, Malia and Sasha review everything first. That's the level of respect Michelle holds. She said something so simple, but so powerful. They didn't choose the spotlight. And that's the truth. They were born into it, but they survived it. And not just survived, they thrived. So what makes this story different? It's not just about a powerful woman or a political family. It's about love. Real, raw, sometimes terrifying love. The kind of love that lets go, even when you want to hold on. It's about raising daughters not to follow your path, but to create their own. It's about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. It's about fear, freedom, and the quiet strength of motherhood. And the craziest part, after everything, the fame, the pressure, the eyes of the world, Michelle said the thing she's proudest of isn't being first lady, it's being their mom.